Most people think manifestation is about getting something, but there's actually a stage of manifestation that almost no one talks about. And when it happens, it can feel so normal that people assume they've stopped manifesting. In reality, the opposite is happening. The manifesting state has just become automatic. And if you've ever wondered why manifestation sometimes stops feeling intense, this is why. Most people think the goal of manifestation is to get something: a relationship, more money, a better opportunity, a different circumstance. And because of that, they measure their progress by whether those things appear yet. But that's not actually the end of the process. The real shift happens when the state itself becomes automatic. And most people don't realize that phase even exists because they're still measuring progress by emotional intensity. They think when manifestation is working, they should feel something dramatic: more confidence, more certainty, more excitement. They imagine some powerful emotional state where they finally feel different enough for reality to change. But the deeper shift doesn't feel dramatic at all. It feels normal, almost too normal. And that's the moment many people misinterpret what's happening. Because when the manifesting state begins to stabilize, you stop thinking about it. You stop monitoring yourself. You stop asking whether you're doing it right. And strangely enough, that can make people nervous. Because if you've been studying manifestation for a while, your mind gets used to checking your thoughts, checking your emotions, checking your assumptions, checking whether you're in the state, checking whether reality is starting to move yet. For example, someone trying to manifest money might start watching every financial change closely. They check their bank account constantly. They analyze every opportunity. They interpret every small event as a possible sign. Or someone manifesting a relationship might check every message. They analyze the tone. They wonder if something has finally shifted. But the moment the state becomes stable, that checking disappears. You stop refreshing the situation. You stop scanning reality for evidence. And when the checking disappears, the mind sometimes wonders, wait, am I forgetting to do something? Should I be visualizing right now? Should I be affirming something? Did I lose the state? Let me pause here for a second, because this is where most people accidentally reset the process. The moment the mind stops monitoring itself, it assumes something must be wrong. So it jumps back in and starts trying again, trying to visualize harder, trying to feel more confident, trying to recreate the state. But what they don't realize is this: they didn't lose the state. The state simply became natural. And that's the real transition. Automatic doesn't mean mechanical. It doesn't mean you're forcing something subconsciously. It simply means the state has become natural. It's no longer something you're trying to maintain. It's something you're living from without effort. The same way you don't wake up every morning and remind yourself who you are. You don't rehearse your identity. You don't repeat your name to make sure it's still true. You simply live from it. Let's look at another example. Imagine someone is asking you your name. You don't pause and think about it. You don't visualize it. You don't affirm it internally. You simply answer because that identity is already stable. That's what the manifesting state eventually becomes. Not something you generate, something you occupy. And once that happens, manifestation starts looking very different because you're no longer trying to make reality change. You're no longer watching for evidence. You're no longer asking whether things are moving. The internal negotiation stops. And when the negotiation stops, your nervous system stabilizes. And this next part is the phase that almost no manifestation videos talk about. That stability is what most people have been searching for the entire time. But because it feels calm, because it feels uneventful, because it feels almost ordinary, people assume nothing important is happening. Imagine learning how to ride a bicycle. In the beginning, you think about every movement. You focus on balancing. You adjust your body. You try not to fall. Your mind is actively involved in every second of the process. But eventually something changes. Balance becomes automatic for you. You're no longer thinking about every movement, you're just riding. And because you're no longer focusing on the mechanics, it almost feels like nothing is happening. But something very important happened. The ability became natural. Manifestation works the same way. At first, people are actively trying to hold the state. They visualize, they affirm, they monitor their emotions, they correct their thoughts. But eventually, the state stabilizes. And when it stabilizes, it becomes automatic. This is one of the biggest misunderstandings in manifestation work. The closer you get to stability, the less dramatic it feels. And that's exactly how identity works. Real identity doesn't feel intense. It feels obvious. It feels settled. It feels like there's nothing left to prove. And when that internal pressure disappears, you stop interacting with reality from lack. You stop interacting from urgency. You stop interacting from effort. Notice, someone who has stabilized the identity of financial stability doesn't obsess over every dollar. They move through opportunities calmly. Someone who has stabilized the identity of being loved doesn't analyze every interaction. They don't constantly question their value. They simply live from that assumption. And reality begins reorganizing around the state you're now living from. Not because you pushed harder, not because you visualized longer, but because identity stabilized. This is when manifestation becomes predictable. Not because you're controlling everything, but because you're no longer interfering with the state. Remember, the mind understands the law much earlier than the body does. But once the state locks in, there's nothing left to manage. Nothing left to maintain. Nothing left to perform. You simply live, and that quiet normality is the moment that the manifesting state becomes automatic for you. Subscribe and enter your manifesting state.